where the hell are we? Is this a benevolent God overseeing our experience? Is God loving? I can't remember what the title of the show was, but
is God really good?
Is God really good? That's right.
Most of the attacks I got were from those who identified as Christians. And the question was in the title of that first video that I put out in January. It was titled, Is God Really Good? Based on the evidence that's available to us and the experiences we have in our own lives, is it reasonable to assume that this realm of existence in which we find ourselves was created by a loving, benevolent God that wants the best for us and cares for us? Or does the evidence suggest that it's anything but that? And actually, this realm was created by not a benevolent, loving God, but a malevolent force or entity. And fear, pain, suffering, trauma is built into the very fabric of this existence. And that's why all of us go through it. You know, some people suffer greatly. And when you get into those dark subject areas, you realize just how bad some people have it and just what a raw deal they have in their lives. We all have some kind of suffering, some kind of trauma, struggles. Those of a more new age spiritual mindset will say, and I've heard them saying it for years, that it's all part of your life plan. It's to allow your soul to grow and evolve. You're having these experiences because you chose to be here and you elected to come in and have these lives. But none of that stuff flies with me anymore. You know, I listened to it for years. All that amounts to simply gaslighting. And it's making excuses to explain away why pain, fear, suffering, trauma is everywhere in this world. Every religious institution teaches that there's some God figure and we are its subjects and we should worship and praise this entity, and that if we go through struggles and fear and pain and suffering, it's mainly our fault because of the choices that we've made and the behaviours that we've chosen. And also it's just part of what we have to endure here. It's just part of life, and you're judged at the end of your life based on how you've chosen to live it. And again, all this amounts to gaslighting now. In my book, I see the world and existence in a very different way to what I did a year ago. So you mentioned we did a show about a year ago. You and Kev came on my podcast, and I was in a very different place back then. So I was still buying a lot of these teachings that, you know, these lives make sense because, you know, we need these lessons to grow and evolve and all that stuff. But I'm not there anymore. I've moved way beyond that, and I just see things very differently now.
Yeah, it is a journey though, isn't it? I mean, I've gone through many stages.
It's comforting to think that there's a loving God. We strive to make sense of these lives because we come here without any kind of roadmap or manual. You just wake up one day and you find yourself in this realm, or as soon as you're old enough to have memories, but you have no memory of how you got here. I can't remember a damn thing. And I think it's that way for 99% of people. So what's that all about? We come in here not knowing what we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to behave. And of course, that gets jumped on by those of a religious persuasion, and they claim they've got the answers. But I fell into what I now see as the trap of believing that we consented to come here, that everything we go through is part of our life plan, and it's all designed to help us grow and evolve and enrich our souls. So people with that sort of mindset will make excuses for a child that is born into satanic ritual abuse. And they'll say, oh, that child on a soul level chose to come in and experience that. Now, that idea is preposterous to me. There is no way anyone would consent to go through the absolute horrors that some of these children do. So the suggestion that they chose it and it's all part of their plan is gaslighting to the extreme to me now. And it's making excuses for the reality of the situation that we find ourselves in. So it's comforting and reassuring to say it's all part of God's plan. It's comforting and reassuring to say we chose this and it's okay because none of this is happening against our will. It's not so comforting and reassuring to come to the grudging realization that we're actually here against our will. And this is a suffering pit, which is designed to create fear, pain, trauma, suffering, struggles, obstacles, hardships. That's actually the evidence that's staring us right in the face. But I think it takes a brave and courageous individual to accept that and take it on. Because when you first do, it sends you into a very dark place. The realization that life is nothing like you thought it was. And everything's layered. You know, when I came across conspiracy research in about 2007, I thought, oh, I'm starting to figure it all out. It's not governments that run the world, it's secret society networks and the Bilderberg Group and the Council on Foreign Relations. And I thought that was the answer to everything. Oh, Freemasons run the world. Okay, I've got it figured out now. But the more rabbit holes you fall down and the more research you do, the more you realize just how little you really do know. And if you're prepared to go all the way with that open mind, there's a reason why open minds are condemned, then I think eventually you will arrive at this point, which is questioning the very nature of this realm, what created it, how we found ourselves here, and most importantly of all, crucially, how we escape. And if you're someone that falls down conspiracy rabbit holes and you figure out that Freemasons and secret societies and stuff run everything in the world, but that's as far as you go, and you don't take it to that spiritual, esoteric, metaphysical level, you're missing the vast bulk of the picture, and you're never going to make sense of this world. Eventually, that research has to lead you to this point, and I'm starting to shape a theory as to why the so-called elites of this world get on so well and get the job done, and so rarely seem to reap any kind of punishment or judgment for their actions. The fraud, treason, and genocide, which was dropped on all of us, because that's what it was. Let's call a spade a spade. Fraud, treason, genocide. The government like their little three-pronged phrases because the social engineers and the behavioural scientists at Tavistock have realised that if it's in threes, it embeds itself in the consciousness more. So that's why they had things like, hands, face, space. So my version is fraud, treason, genocide, which is what it was. So just think of them. Johnson, Hancock. I've got a special level of contempt to reserve for Hancock. Yeah, Whitty, Valence, all of them. Gates, Fauci. Just think of these individuals. All the dictators in Australia, Dan Andrews, all these dictators, Trudeau, all around the world. Where are they all now? Walking around, free men and women. As far as I'm aware, not one of them has been brought to task for what they did, the suffering they caused, the death that they caused in huge numbers. So my view is that this so-called elite class, we all know who we're talking about, these groups, these individuals that run everything, have figured out that the way to get on in this realm is to embrace fear, suffering, trauma, and to induce that and cause it to others. Because all the evidence shows us that if you conduct yourself in that way, and you can go way back in human history, it doesn't have to be just this time frame. Look at every period in known human history. There's been war, there's been famine, there's been hardship, there's been strife and struggle. They've figured out that that's the way to succeed in this realm. You get rewarded if you behave in a wicked, evil way towards others. Meanwhile, if you try and live your life in the opposite direction, and you live according to natural law teachings, do not treat others in a way you would not wish to be treated yourself, and you conduct yourself in a responsible manner, in a moral manner, you consider whether your behaviours, your actions are going to impact negatively on another living sentient being. What are you going to reap in exchange for those kind of behaviours? Suffering, fear, trauma, pain, struggle, hardship. Just being real. So one of the things that prompted this God series of videos was not only experiences in my own life, so direct personal experience, but also pretty much everyone I knew, all my friends, were going through hardship of one kind or another. And most of these people are what you would describe as decent people. So they try their best to conduct themselves in a moral way. They try not to impact negatively on others. And all they seem to get in exchange for doing that is a whole ton of shit dropped on them in this world. So I think there's a lesson there somewhere. If you're evil and wicked and you stamp all over other people's rights and you even genocide them, this realm of existence will reward you. If you try and do the opposite, all you're going to reap is hardship. And I believe that's because of the way that this reality has been set up. It's been coded. So there's a lot of talk these days of us living in some sort of simulation realm. And for a while, I couldn't really understand what people meant when they spoke about that, but I get it now. So it's like a virtual reality matrix, if you like. The Matrix movie is often used as an analogy for the nature of this reality. And I think that's probably getting on the right tracks. So I now accept that this realm has been constructed a bit like a virtual reality computer game, and there's code at the base of it. For many years, I was hearing about energy, frequency, and vibration. So particularly when you get into the studies of Nikola Tesla, he spoke about that. He said, if you want to understand the universe, think in terms of frequency, energy, and vibration. And that all still applies. It's all still valid. But I think as a subplot to energy, frequency, and vibration, there's coding of the type you get in a computer software program. So we're in a realm which has been coded in a certain way, and it has parameters and it has rules, just like a virtual reality game. If you want to play the game, you have to play by the rules. If you want characters in the game to behave in a certain way, there's a level beyond which they can't go because the game is not coded to facilitate that. If you're playing, this is an old school reference because I'm not a gamer, but Space Invaders, for anyone that remembers the 80s. Just imagine you're playing Space Invaders, okay? Imagine it's 1981 or something. And then suddenly you're like, oh, I don't want to play Space Invaders anymore, I want to play Pac-Man now. Well, you can't play Pac-Man while you're in the middle of Space Invaders because the game is only coded to facilitate Space Invaders. So in the same way, in this realm, you can't be a good person and be moral and conduct yourself in a responsible way and expect to live happily because the rules of the game don't allow for that. But you can live without consequence if you're an evil, lying, deceptive, satanic, psychopathic piece of shit. That will work for you. So I think the evidence for all this is staring us in the face, but it's just a very difficult thing for people to come to terms with because it's not comfortable, it's not reassuring, but possibly it is truth. That's right. A lot of soul selling goes on. My work exposes that. In the music industry, it's more obvious than anywhere else, I think. Occasionally, you see individuals apparently paying the price for the way they behaved. So every now and again, you'll get the odd name, like P. Diddy, for example, who's in the news at the moment. P. Diddley, P. Dodie. But even if anything does happen to him, and there's still a chance that he'll be allowed to walk free, he's still only one individual. Let's go back to some of the names I mentioned earlier. Johnson, Hancock, Whitty, Valence, Fauci, Gates, these people. Does anyone imagine that any of these individuals is going to have to answer for what they did to huge numbers of people over the course of the past 4 years? Probably not, if we're being honest. Probably each and every one of them is going to pass away peacefully in their sleep at a ripe old age, having not been brought to bear to justice for anything they did. So that, I think, is an indication of the true nature of this realm. So my thinking now is that this place was created not for our betterment, not for the enrichment of our souls, but as a way of trapping us so that our fear-based energy, which is created through the way that we're forced to live, can be reaped and harvested. So it's often described as a loosh farm, going back to that term first coined by Robert Munro in the 1970s.
Yeah.
Loosh being extreme expressions of energy. So it doesn't just have to be fear-based energy. There's a lot of that around. A lot of people are feeling anxious, worried, fearful for various reasons. You've only got to turn on the mainstream news on any TV channel or radio station around the world, and all you get is fear, fear, fear. Oh my God, this is going to happen. Here's a reason to feel anxious. Here's a reason to feel twitchy and edgy. So everything has been set up to extract all this stuff. And it all points to this place having been created not by a loving, benevolent God. So something created that. There is existence. Where did that come from? Well, I don't think the so-called God of this realm created everything there is. I think the so-called God of this realm is rightly described by many people as Satan. The so-called God of this realm was Yahweh in the Old Testament of the Bible, a psychopath by any other name. The so-called God of this reality was described in the Gnostic tradition as the Demiurge, and it was known as Yaldabaoth. And a name given to it by the Cathars was Rex Mundi. So there's many different names you can put on this force, this entity that's said to have created this realm. And whichever one you choose, what we're looking at is a lesser God. We're looking at some kind of force or some kind of entity which somehow was allowed to gain enough power to create an entire realm of existence for itself, this one. And we, as divine sparks, if you like, that's a phrase that you hear often, that came out of the Gnostic tradition as well, but it suggests that at our very core level, at the core of our existence, of our being, we are expressions of that original divine Godhead, the real God, if you like. And we are gods ourselves. In that regard, which many people will have trouble with. Those of a religious persuasion will be like, no, we're subjects of God. We're effectively slaves and servants of God. We've got to bow down and worship God. But a different way of looking at things is that we are actually gods. We're all our own gods. We have creative power within us, and we're sovereign, and we're able to make decisions for ourselves. So I think this is where the good news lies, and we can come back to this towards the end. But something has to explain what it is that drives most people towards doing the right thing, living in the right way. So what I was saying earlier about how people that try and live in a moral manner, and they consider the impact that their actions is going to have on others, even though they reap a whole world of shit for doing that, they still carry on behaving in that way. And it's that way with me. Even though I've come to these realizations, as dark as they may be, I don't believe it's made me behave in any worse kind of way. If anything, it's had the opposite effect. If anything, I'm more compassionate and more empathetic towards others now than I ever was before. And not only other humans, any living being. You know, I'll go out in the garden and I will make a conscious effort not to stand on any ants. So I think coming to these acceptances has made me even more moral. And it's made me want to do the right thing even more. So where does that come from then? If you look around you and you see evil bastards succeeding in life and thriving, shouldn't that make everyone think, well, I'm going to behave in that way then? I'm going to tread all over other people and not give a shit about their rights and just do whatever I want in a completely selfish way. But most people don't live that way. I think most people want to be good and will do the right thing. If they saw somebody collapse in the street, I like to think that most people would run over and try and help if they could. So that's all coming from somewhere. And we call it a conscience. That prevents us from behaving in certain ways. It's that fail-safe sort of firewall, which is referred to as a conscience. And inherently, most of us know the difference between right and wrong behavior. There are going to be exceptions. There'll always be psychopaths and sociopaths in society who are incapable of being empathetic and compassionate towards others because it's just the way their brains are structured. But most people would like to help others if they can and would like to do the right thing if they can. And that has got to be our original true essence still within us. It's still bleeding through from somewhere. It's because we're expressions of that original Godhead, we're those divine sparks, that we seek to do the right thing. That's where our consciences come from. So that's something that this force, this entity, call it what you will, which created this realm, is not able to control. And that's why we have such a hard time living in this world. It's such a struggle because it's set up to reward evil and wickedness. But most of us don't want to live in an evil, wicked way. We seek to go beyond that. So the time that we spend in this realm, with all of its restrictions and all of its rules and regulations that have been set into place by the code, it's really, really difficult living in this world, in this realm, these lives. It's tough because this is not our true home. I believe that we've been tricked or coerced in some way into coming here because I don't accept that anyone would have agreed on a soul level to come into this realm. I mean, we hear that, oh, there's light workers that have come in to help others and, people reincarnate because they want to come and help humanity to progress and all of this. That stuff just doesn't resonate with me anymore. People will make those arguments for days, but it's not for me anymore. You know, we've got a lot of threats facing ourselves and our children's generation right now with the New World Order Master Plan and all the various expressions of it. And I'm not for 1 second saying people should just sit back and allow this prison to be built around them. Absolutely, we have to rise up and resist and, do whatever we can to, if not stop this stuff, at least stem the tide a bit and prevent it from getting too bad. But ultimately, I don't think this place can be fixed because of the way it's been set up. So the best we can hope for is to find our way out of it and to help others to do the same if we can, without one single human having to do anything. The system does it all. And I think that's what this place is like. So Yaldabaoth, whatever, the Demiurge created it, this force, this entity, and just left it to it. And it runs itself. So all the evil and the fear and the loose energy and stuff is generated, but without any of these beings or these forces, these entities, whatever these expressions of consciousness are, needing to get involved. It just takes care of itself. So a big question I've got, and I'm by no means claiming to have all the answers, I'm still piecing it all together in my mind. But well, first of all, let me say that out of all the religious teachings I've looked at, all the systems, all the institutions, all the New Age sort of spiritual ideas, the one that makes the most sense to me is the Gnostic teachings to explain this place that we find ourselves. It was created by this lesser god, this demiurge. We are trapped here on a soul level, and we've got to find our way out of it. And you're only ever going to reap fear, suffering, trauma. There's so much trauma. Trauma is the key to everything. It seems everyone comes with trauma. You hear the word so often. Counselors use it, therapists use it. It's in trauma-based mind control. But it's also in birth trauma. Just the very act of being born, the very act of coming into this place through the birth canal. Hospital births are set up to be as traumatic as possible for a new baby coming in. So you're in your mother's womb for 9 months, floating in amniotic fluid, and it's warm and it feels safe and it's happy and it's peaceful. But then before you're even born, Janice has said, you get these ultrasound tests to make sure the baby's okay. Yeah. And so they clamp this thing to the mother's stomach, and the sound waves pulse through to the fetus, and it's absorbing it all. And it's very, very frightening and traumatic because it's invading that safe, quiet, calm, warm world with all this noise and this chaos, and it doesn't know what's happening to it. And then the moment of birth comes, and the baby is born into a room full of fluorescent bright lights, which are very frightening because it's not known light before that point. And the first thing the doctor does is smack its ass to make it cry. Yeah. And we're told, the reason for that is to get the fluid off the baby's lungs so it can breathe properly. But no, actually, it's just trauma. It's more trauma. The second you arrive, you're given pain and a shock, and it's alarming, and it's hurtful, and it's frightening. Yeah. So what chance do any of us stand when we're traumatized from birth? So again, that's part of the way that this reality has been set up. And this so-called elite ruling class has realized that the way to get on and the way to avoid hardship and stuff is to just be evil and just be wicked, and you'll get along fine because you're in sync with the coding of this place. So a question that I've got, and I don't claim to have the answer, and many people will claim that they do, is if that's what we've got, if that's what this realm is, and that's the way it seems to me, where was the original God of creation when this place was being allowed to be created? If we've got this lesser god, this Yaldabaoth, this fallen angel, Satan, whatever it is, which created this hell world, and we're its playthings, where was the original God of creation? Because I accept that there is one, which is far greater than this Yaldabaoth character, but why has that god force not shut this place down by now? Why has the Yaldabaoth thing not been banished to, oblivion? Yeah. And why has this place not been discontinued? Seemingly, we come in with our minds completely wiped, and we don't know where we are or what we're supposed to do. We don't know anything. No. We're just left to figure it all out. So if a loving, benevolent God created this place and we consented to come here to enrich our souls and grow and evolve and all of that, then wouldn't we retain some sort of memory of why we're here? Wouldn't there be some confirmation that that's why we're here? I mean, we're just guessing. People that tell you that, they're just guessing because nobody really knows.
No, I agree.
There's no proof of anything. And that's why agnosticism, as you've just said, makes the most sense out of any kind of belief system. Just being prepared to accept and to admit that you just don't know. You're trying your very best to find the answers. And I think you can find some answers, and I think I have. And I'm sure you have as well. But you get to a point where you just don't have the answers. So I think this realm is very much in line with the way the Gnostics described it. I think they were pretty much on point, and that would be a reason why they were persecuted so much and hunted down and obliterated. But then you get to the point where you ask yourself, well, how did the original God of creation allow this? How could this pit of hell be allowed to exist? It's an abomination to a loving, benevolent God, isn't it? So if some lesser being was allowed to create it, why has it not been shut down by now? So we have to be prepared to accept that we don't have the answers to everything. I go on podcasts and shows and stuff all day long, and every time I log into my email, somebody's saying, watch this video, have a listen to this podcast, and I do look at a lot of them. And all I hear is so many people spouting opinions and claiming that they've got the answers to everything. So they'll say, it's this way, and then the next podcaster will come on, no, it's not that, it's this. And then somebody else will come on, you're both wrong, it's this. None of them actually know. There's a lot of ego. Everyone wants to be the one to tell you what's going on, and they want to be the one that's got all the answers. But the truth is, they don't have the answers. None of us do. We can give it our best guess, and we can speculate, and we can formulate ideas based on experiences and such, but none of us actually knows, because we're not allowed to know. This is a place of complete mystery, and we've just got to do our best to figure it out in the time that we've got here. I'm just saying that I can see ways in which whatever being or force created this realm could have done it so much better. So let's start with the human body. The human body is flawed. It's programmed to age and degrade and decay and to end in death. And people will say, well, yeah, you've got to have that, otherwise these lives would never end. But there's just so many flaws with it. Let's be graphic here. What is the point of us having to urinate and defecate? What's the point of that? So we have to take in food as an energy source to keep these bodies going. And then the food and the drink turns into waste product that we have to excrete. It's disgusting. It's horrible. Why? Why is it necessary? Let's expand that out to the natural world, the animal world. All that you get there every single day is horror and death and pain and suffering and fear. So living creatures hunt down other living creatures and in many cases tear them apart while they're still living so that they can continue to live themselves because their bodies need that nutrition. What? What kind of loving, benevolent entity would create a place where that was necessary when it could have been done so much better? It could have been designed so that all living sentient beings live in peace and harmony with each other. There's no aggression, there's no predation, and maybe they just feed on plants. People say, oh, plants have feelings, but okay, if not plants, then breath, prana. How about that? I mean, why is it even necessary for us to have to take food into our bodies, whether we're animals or humans? Why is that necessary? It could have been done so much better. So, yeah, I can see ways in which the system that we've got could be improved. And, these bodies, they're prone to disease and decay. And what kind of sense does that make when people get cancer and some people are... What about people that are born mentally retarded? What about that? You're unfortunate enough to come in and you've got some sort of, condition where you can't think in the way that regular people can. You've got some mental retardation. What chance do you stand in trying to figure out what this place is and make sense of it all when your brain just doesn't operate in that way? You're just not able to make sense of it. Where's the justice there? What kind of sense does it make for people to come in like that? Look at people in wheelchairs their whole life through some hereditary disease that they've inherited through no fault of their own. What kind of sense does that make? Where's the value in that kind of life? People will make all kinds of excuses again, going back to the gaslighting. They'll say, oh, on a soul level, they wanted to experience what it's like to suffer, and it allows others to give them compassion. And so they learn their lessons through giving the help and the assistance that they need. But no, all of these are just excuses. They're excuses made by people who aren't bold enough to accept what's staring them right in the face, that this is a nasty place. I've always known it. You mentioned earlier a show where I talked about looking at myself in the mirror when I was a young boy and just thinking, I shouldn't be here. This is wrong. I've always felt that, to be honest. And, I've never wanted to be here. When I think back through my whole life, I've just never wanted to be here. So I wouldn't have chosen this. I was tricked or coerced in some way.
Yeah.
And my mission now is to find a way out of here, still working on that one, and to never, ever come back at all, ever. Can I state it any more emphatically?
Not at all, mate. Not at all.
I kind of knew that this was going to happen.
Yeah.
It's a very strange thing. So maybe there was some foreknowledge before I got here. Maybe it's the same for all of us of what I was going to go through.
Yeah.
But again, I can't accept that I would have agreed to it. I think, and this was part of the Gnostic teachings as well, that we are tricked or coerced into coming here somehow. And we hear this about when you pass over and you go into the astral realm, which is what lies beyond. This is the idea of the reincarnation soul trap, which is gaining a lot of traction recently. A lot of people talking about this. The idea that these entities, which would be lesser expressions of the Yaldabaoth demiurge thing, I guess, archons, they're described as the Gnostics, archons or demons, if you will. They are very clever and deceptive. So the way that we have deception everywhere and duplicity in this realm is an expression of what's in the astral plane as well. There's more deception there, seemingly. And we hear through those that have had near-death experiences, so they've left their bodies, they've come out of 3D, gone into the astral realm, and they've experienced what's there. They've come back and said that these beings, well, I don't think they realise that it's these beings that are doing it, but they come back and they say that they've seen certain figures. So if it's a Christian who has a near-death experience, they will experience the figure of Jesus. If they're a Buddhist, they'll experience the figure of Buddha, because that's what they're expecting to meet when they pass over, because of their belief system. If you're not religious and you leave your body, according to many of these NDEs, you have loved ones who have passed over. Maybe your dead mum or your dead brother or whatever will appear to you. And what the majority of these people say is that these figures, whether it's Jesus or your dead mum, say you need to go back. There's a mission you need to complete on Earth. It's not your time yet. And they're very persuasive. And some of these experiences say they didn't want to come back, and they said, no, I'm beyond that now. I want to move on. But these figures say, no, you have to go back. And they end up coming back into their bodies, in many cases, against their will. And they say that that's what they encountered, and that's what lies beyond. Of course, I've got no way of proving this because I've never had an NDE. But the idea does resonate with me. And I think it pays to be prepared for that, if that's what we're going to encounter when we pass over, those of us who have no interest whatsoever in coming back to this place. So it could well be that we're going to experience something like that, and these beings are going to be very, very persuasive, and they're going to say, no, you have to go back, it's not your decision, but it is our decision, because we are sovereign, we have all the power we could ever need, and we are expressions of that original creative force, that divine Godhead, if you like. So we call the shots. We're not subservient to any kind of entity, especially deceptive, lying ones that have had to resort to those measures to get us to come here in the first place. We're way above that. So we get to decide. Another analogy is, if you think of the average individual, people might refer to them as NPCs or normies, regular members of society. They will look up to authority figures in this life. So they might pay attention to the Prime Minister, other government ministers. They might pay attention to the BBC Evening News. They might pay attention to the priest at their local church or their doctor. All these authority figures, a professor, university professor, a celebrity. So they're used to, through an entire lifetime, being subservient to authority figures and doing what they say and hanging on their every word. So when these people pass over, if they're going to encounter these beings who are saying, you need to go back into a new body, a new life, and there's lessons you need to learn, there's things you didn't do in this life, you've got to complete your mission. If they've spent a lifetime acquiescing to authority figures, they're far more likely to acquiesce to these figures and say, oh, okay, I guess I better go back then. But you have many of us now who completely reject authority figures and anything they've got to say. Not interested in the BBC Evening News, not interested in Keir Starmer or anything he's got to say. We're the ones who are most likely, if that's the kind of thing we're going to encounter in the astral plane, to be able to say to these beings, fuck off. I'm moving beyond. There's no way I'm going back. You've got no power over me. I decide what I'm going to do. It's an anarchist state of mind. We need an anarchist state of mind in this world, and we need an anarchist state of mind in what lies beyond. We just need to carry that consciousness with us, and hopefully we can do that. Again, I don't know. But that's the closest to any kind of roadmap for navigating our way out of this realm and not finding ourselves back here all over again, like Bill Murray and Groundhog Day, that I can come up with right now.
And if Earth is a school, there is lessons in at least that. The fact that you are able to discern the fact that we are being tricked in this realm all the time, we're constantly being tricked, and if we can figure out how to navigate this area and have that discernment, then if it's true that we then go into the astral and are potentially deceived again, then hopefully, like you say, we have enough about us. But hopefully we would have enough discernment ourselves then in the astral. I mean, who knows, Mark? I tell you a story though. If it's
just the fact that people have these gifts and are able to heal and things like that is another hint towards the idea that we're greater than this place, and we're greater than whatever created it. We come from somewhere else way out there. We've just got to get out of this trap to get back there, because it seems these beings, these entities, call them archons if you will, are very determined to keep us coming back in this recycled reincarnation loop.
Yeah.
And many of us have just had enough. We're pissed off with it, don't want to be here anymore. We're going to do what we can for as long as we're around. We're going to try and be as helpful and beneficial to others and to the world as we can for as long as we're required to be here. But we've got no interest in coming back. So we're going to have to be very determined and very resolute in standing firm and saying no to the gaslighting that we're possibly going to experience when our time comes to leave our bodies. Mm-hmm. All the teachings of these secret societies and mystery schools through the ages all comes down to this kind of knowledge. What if what they're teaching in these places is the reality of this realm, the fact that it's designed to cultivate fear, pain and suffering, the fact that if you want to get on in this realm for as long as you're here, then conduct behaviours that are in line with cultivating fear, pain and suffering. But when you go beyond, you don't want to come back. Maybe that's what they're teaching in these places. And maybe it is as simple as just being firmly resolved to absolutely not coming back in any way, shape or form. So people will say, depending on which religious tradition you're listening to or personal opinion, that you have to do all kinds of practices in order to gain enlightenment and find your way out of here. So some will say you have to meditate and you have to think of monks in monasteries. They live an entire life just shut away, praying, chanting 10, 12 hours a day, abstaining from everything. And they believe that that's what you have to do to find your way into heaven, quote unquote. What if it's nowhere near as complicated as that? What if you don't have to meditate or do any of that stuff? What if you just have to carry with you that determination to not come back and to not be tricked and deceived? And maybe through the work I do exposing the music industry, I talk about subliminal messaging in music videos and ads and movies and stuff like that, programming the way that certain mindsets are cultivated in the general public's way of thinking through popular culture and entertainment, and how to break the spell, how to spot symbolism, all these signs and symbols that they put in music videos and on record sleeves and stuff. It's a case of just breaking the spell, learning to spot the signs and symbols, knowing what they mean, learning to spot predictive programming, learning to spot societal programming put out there by Tavistock and all these kinds of agencies, so that you can't be fooled in the same way. You're not susceptible to mind control anymore and social engineering. So maybe if you spend a lifetime learning how to break that kind of programming, maybe that's pretty good grounding for what you're going to experience in the astral, in what lies beyond. So maybe those of us that have paid attention to all this stuff and not just scoffed at it and said it's conspiracy theory, it's ridiculous, and had a right old laugh at it, as many people do, maybe we're standing ourselves in pretty good stead for the type of consciousness that we're going to have when we encounter whatever lies beyond, when we pass out of these lives. Ultimately, it's all just information, more and more information and data, and you can end up drowning in that stuff, in the fine detail of it all, names, places, dates, detail. Eventually, you reach a point where you have to question what any of it is all about and why any of it is happening. And that brings you to the very core question of just what is this place? What is it? Why are we here?
I know it's bonkers.
It really is. That van had an energetic frequency match with my thoughts about physical death, so it appeared to me. So I see that sort of thing now as slightly more sinister than I used to. And with duality, it's pretty much the same. I used to think, it's great that everything's got an opposing value. And you can't have good without evil. You can't have up without down. You can't have male without female, because it's very difficult to navigate your way through this realm through any given day without giving into anger or shame or guilt or resentment or whatever it is. It's very, very difficult to move through a human life, especially in these times. It's deliberately been made difficult for us. And we hear, again, from these NDE experiences, that one of the weapons that's used to persuade souls to come back in, whether it's into the body they've just left or whether it's to reincarnate into a new body, is guilt and shame. This is the idea of the life review, where these entities have some way of showing you what you did in your life, a bit like a PDD video, maybe. And they deliberately home in on the moments where you were less than perfect and you had an angry tirade in a shop, or you did something that you're not proud of. Looking back, you would have done it in a different way. They show you these things. They guilt shame you. And according to these NDEs, they make you agree to come back because you're so upset by the things that you did in your last life and you want to make it right by coming into a new one. But again, I think that's just another weapon that's used to gaslight us. I think we're all victims here. We've become victims of this force or this parasite virus, if you like. And we never wanted to be here, any of us. You know, the fact that so many of us have compassion and empathy and want to be kind to others and kind to other living beings, that's not coming from Yaldabaoth or this bloody thing. That's coming from something far greater than that. And that must be our true essence. That's where we originally came from. So as for what lies beyond the astral, if we can find our way out of it and not be tricked into coming back, I have no idea what lies beyond. Maybe what lies beyond is anything we want to. So maybe we can just have whatever kind of existence we would choose. And that's going to be steeped in joy and peace and love and not in all the horrible shit we've had to endure down here. Maybe you can just cease to exist if you choose. Maybe you can be like, well, you know, done a human lifetime, that's it, I'm out, bye. And that's the end. Maybe you can choose that for yourself. I really don't know. How can any of us know?
Fear.
So yeah, he was a heavy guy.
There's fear. There's so much fear involved in the teachings and the stories that we're given and the programming that we have. Everything's about fear, isn't it? You know, not finding that truth. If we are the God's part, we're kept away from that by the programming and the fear. We must look outside. It always seems to come back to that for me. Wherever I go with it, whoever I speak to, it always seems to come back to that we're better and more powerful than they want us to believe.
Well, if you can't have light without darkness, then so many of us have been through enough darkness in these lives. So it's time to let the light in.
100%. Before, I know I don't want to keep you, but don't you find it interesting as well, now that the soul trap thing's taking shape and people are talking about these subjects more, or at least, you know, there's a few of us at least talking about these subjects, don't you find it interesting that the alternative media are now all becoming born-again Christians, people like Russell Brand and Jordan Peterson and all these guys? I think it's quite interesting that that's now appearing and creating more distraction and diversion away from topics. Yeah,
Christian truthers, which is a bit like saying vegetarian carnivores to me.
It's a wild world, that's for sure. I mean, I think the Gnostics seem to get it right for me, and you know, films
more than any other teachings I've looked at. Yeah, they were on point.
I think so, for me at this moment anyway, unless things change. But like Westworld, the program Westworld just seems to be what it's like. You know, that you've got these entities, if you like, or these controllers that kind of take you out the game, reprogram you and shove you back in. But we need to find a way of taking power back.
Another great show was Ashes to Ashes. Did you ever see that on the BBC?
I only saw a little bit of it. Yeah, I do remember it being out, but I never really watched it.
That show, and the final episode tells you so much truth cloaked in fiction, you know, but it's allegorical. I won't give everything away for anyone that wants to watch the show, but you get an insight into one of these controllers, these handlers, these entities that is keeping souls trapped in this artificial construct, this world. And there's a certain way in which they are able to escape and move on.
Mark, so I want to thank you. Great chatting to you again.